The next morning, and Sanaa woke up differently. They dreamed of having a perfect preparations for Ollie. Every time they talked about the future, they imagined a little boy running around the house. Sarah carrying his father's name and becoming the pride of the family, preparing tea. Months later, not because she became pregnant, but because the whole family was excited. She had once grown up in. But there was one thing everyone kept saying. Ollie came out of his room. I hope it's a boy. Phone in hand. Ehsan would smile. Why are you making tea? Nod, he asked lazily. Sanaa secretly wished Sarah for the same looked at him calmly. Finally, because someone needs to start the day properly. After hours of pain and struggle, properly, the doctor came out of the delivery room with a smile. Sarah didn't react. She simply placed a cup on the table. The room became silent. Ollie raised an eyebrow. Disappointment appeared on their faces. Ehsan and Sanaa watched quietly from the side. They were unsure whether to intervene, but deep inside, Sarah remained composed. She felt her dreams had been broken. I'm not ordering you. She named the baby Sarah. I'm trying to help you. Sarah was beautiful. Ollie sat down reluctantly. She had bright eyes, but his attitude didn't change. Whenever she laughed, throughout breakfast, the whole house he kept checking his phone. Ignoring but her parents everyone. Never truly Sarah saw her value. Everything. They fed her after a long silence and took care of her spoke needs. Again, but they never gave her the love she deserved. When you were younger, when Sarah took her first steps, who told you celebrated? I don't when she need spoke studies. Her first word. I'll do no whatever one recorded I want. It. When she Sarah nodded her tiny slowly, arms, asking for a hug. Problem. Her Ollie parents frowned. Were often too busy. What problem? At family gatherings, Sarah leaned relatives would forward. Don't you worry. Were never taught you'll discipline. Have a son next time. Only comfort. Sarah was too young to understand the words, quiet, but she Ollie's could feel the expression hardened. Every night, don't lecture me. She would sit alone Sarah's with her toys while her parents talked about I'm having not lecturing child. You. I'm telling you what life will teach you later. 2 years passed. That one sentence lingered. Sanaa became pregnant but Ollie again. Stood up. This time, everyone prayed harder and than he walked away. And when the baby arrived, their wish came true. He never listened to anyone. The family celebrated as if a king had become impossible. The house was filled with sweets, however, gifts, and congratulations because she named him something they didn't. From that day, change doesn't happen in comfort. Ollie received the best clothes. Days Ollie received the best Sarah toys. Stayed at home. Ollie received endless hugs and kisses. Late nights, meanwhile, irregular sleep. Years passed, constant phone and use. Sarah grew into a quiet and thoughtful little girl. One evening, she took a different approach. Every morning, she placed a notebook on the table before everyone else. From tomorrow, she said, neatly folded her blanket, will study 1 hour with school, and helped her mother with small chores. Teach me. But no matter what she did, she replied. She rarely heard words of appreciation. I don't need you, he said. Meanwhile, Sarah looked at him treated directly. Like the center of the universe. I didn't ask if you need me. If he wanted a toy, silence. He got it. This time, if he wanted ice cream, Ollie didn't respond. Someone immediately brought it. But he refused. If he made a mistake, the next day laughed. He didn't show up. Cute. Sarah didn't watch everything silently. She simply noted it. The school announced a drawing competition. Day 2, Sarah loved drawing. She spent days working on her picture. Attitude unchanged. She carefully colored but on every corner day and put something all her unexpected happened. The day of the competition arrived. Not because later, he agreed. The principal called her name during the morning assembly. Sarah didn't celebrate. First prize goes to Sarah. She just opened the book. The entire school applauded. Ollie leaned Sarah's back. Eyes sparkled with happiness. Sarah began time in her life, not rushing. She felt proud of herself, not forcing. She received a trophy and a certificate. Ollie didn't on her way home, but something strange started happening against her chest. Sarah wasn't she could like hardly wait to show her parents. She was when patient, she entered the house. Clear. She found her father playing with Ollie. And slowly, Daddy, Ollie she shouted excitedly. Things he had ignored for years. What happened? Not because he wanted Sarah proudly held out the trophy. Because for the first time, I won first prize in someone school. Refused to give without up even on him. Standing up. Meanwhile, Ehsan glanced at it. And Sanaa watched nice. Silently. Then he immediately finally turned back to Ollie. She is doing what we failed to do. Let's play with your new car. Sanaa nodded with tears in her eyes. That was all. I ignored her. No, and she is still fixing what we broke. But Sarah didn't see it as revenge, just or responsibility. That's she nice. Saw it as understanding. Her excitement disappeared because she instantly. Knew both sides now. She slowly walked to her room. Child. That night, the spoiled child. She placed the trophy on a shelf beside her bed. But healing she stared at it for a long time. It is slow. The trophy represented painful, her hard work, and often, but it couldn't fill the emptiness. Yet in Sarah her heart. Continued anyway. Days later, because another incident occurred. She was Ollie not the forgotten girl with a mild fay. She was the strength Sarah the house was now never 11 years old. Weeks passed. Time had changed. But progress many things in the house. Ollie but not still her resisted most days. She was still the quiet daughter in the background. Some days he attended the study sessions with the one Sarah. Who helped without being Other days, and the one who received attention only and locked himself in his room. Ollie, but something had started to shift, was now very slightly. He had become more demanding, more than before, more stubborn, arguing less and more than before, used to getting everything even if instantly. He didn't admit it. If he cried, Sarah noticed everything. Stopped. But if she shouted, force change. Everyone rushed. She understood that pressure would push him away. Different meals were cooked she until he was consistent. Sarah calm, noticed everything. Present. One evening, said nothing. Everything changed. One evening, Ollie came home small late, happened that left angry. A deep mark on her heart. He threw his bag on the sofa. It was Ollie's birthday. I hate everything. The house was decorated with balloons rushed from the kitchen. A big cake was placed on the table. Ollie didn't answer. Guests were invited. He kicked the chair, and gifts were piled up in the corner. I don't want Sarah anything. Helped her mother all day. Hassan stood up. She cleaned the house, frustrated, arranged chairs, this behavior and even wrapped a few gifts. Nobody shouted back. When the party started anyway, Ollie was the star. Silence fell in the room. Everyone clapped for him. That sentence hit harder than expected. Because it was partly true with him. Sarah stood near the wall, watching quietly. She didn't expect anything. His hands were shaking slightly. She still wished someone would notice her effort. His anger didn't look powerful. The cake cutting began. Ollie laughed loudly as he smashed cake on everyone's faces. She said gently. Everyone laughed with him. Ollie turned. Then he turned toward Sarah. Without thinking, Sarah didn't raise her voice. He threw a piece of cake at her dress. Something in her tone was different. Not fear. Then laughter again. Not authority. Kids will be kids, but clarity. Someone said. Ollie hesitated. Stood still. Then slowly dripped down her clothes. The room remained silent. No one offered to clean her. Sarah sat across from him. No one said sorry. What happened today? She quietly walked away to the kitchen. Ollie cleaned herself. After a long pause, she sat alone on the floor in a lower voice. Her dress was still slightly stained. Sanaa's expression she hugged her knees close to her chest. Hassan looked down. For the first time, stayed quiet. Something inside her started to break. Frustration, not her body, into pain. Not her confidence. They said I'm useless, but something that I don't try. Her silence wasting time. His voice cracked slightly. Something inside her had shifted completely over the past few years. For the first time, she was still quiet at home. The boy wasn't arrogant anymore. But outside, he was breaking. She was becoming someone else. Sarah's voice softened. At school, you are not no longer just a good student. Ollie scoffed. She was the top of her class. Teachers trusted her. I understand more than you respected her. And slowly, her name started appearing in competitions, certificates, and school announcements. You were given everything without direction. Nothing had changed. And I was given nothing. Ollie was now direction anyway. He had become more arrogant with time. I don't know how to fix it. To being the center of that moment changed everything. If Sarah scored 95%, nobody asked about it. Deeply. If Ollie scored 60%, doesn't start with confidence. It became a celebration. It starts with collapse. Sarah returned home holding an envelope forward. Her hands were slightly shaking. Everything today, not from fear, but excitement. You just need to stop running. She had been selected for a national scholarship program, but he didn't leave either. A full opportunity, and that was enough for now. A life-changing chance. That night, she walked into the house in the courtyard. Mom, the wind was calm. I need to show you something. But her thoughts were heavy. Sanaa was in the kitchen. She had come back later, thinking she would only guide him. But now she realized from the living room. Deeper. Ollie was loudly watching TV. Reopens your own Sarah wounds. Stood there for a moment. Still, she didn't regret it. Then she placed the envelope on the table for the first time in her life to her room. She wasn't later trying that to night, be seen. Hassan saw the envelope. Trying to make someone else feel seen. He opened it casually, and as he read it, a different kind of strength. His eyes widened inside the house. A scholarship. Ollie sat alone in his room. Study support for the first time in years. Selection. He didn't pick up his phone immediately. He looked towards Sarah's room, thinking. But then Ollie called him. Slowly changing. My game is not working. Sometimes, and just that is like where the moment passed. The envelope was left in a way it had never been forgotten. 2 days later, silence of comfort. Sarah herself, but the silence of reflection. I got selected for a scholarship. Since Sarah returned. I need permission and documents. Things had begun to shift. Hassan barely looked up. Not dramatically, ask your mother, but steadily, like a river changing its path over time. I don't have time for all this paperwork. Not focus on your studies for now. Not suddenly transformed. Sarah stood silently, but aware. Deadline is next week. Classes again. She said softly. He apologized when he was wrong. Only and for the first time filled the house again. He started asking questions instead of rejecting everything. And once again, it wasn't easy for him. Sarah became invisible. Some days were still heavy. But he no longer ran from responsibility. One evening, quiet. Sarah was sitting in the celebrations, reading. Ollie came and stood near the door. No proud smiles from the family. Only a simple bag packed with her clothes, after a moment, books, and a few belongings she had collected over the years. She stood near the door for a moment. Of course, this house had been her world. He sat down slowly, but it had never felt like home. Followed. Sana stood in the hallway, adjusting Ollie's clothes. I don't think I ever understood anything really before. Going? She asked, almost her casually. She didn't interrupt. Yes. Ollie continued. Hassan was sitting on the sofa, being loved, watching his phone. Everything. Take care of yourself. Not being told no, he said without looking up. Slightly. But it wasn't joyful. No questions about her future, didn't it? No. Sarah looked at him calmly. No. Ollie ran past her carrying a toy car. It confused you. Don't forget to bring me something, he laughed. Ollie looked at her. Sarah looked at him for the first time. There was no arrogance in his eyes. I won't forget. Ollie lowered his head. But she knew something important. I'm sorry, he whispered. She was not coming back the same. Not dramatic. She stepped out of the house. Just real. The sunlight for the first time in the story. Apology meant understanding. Not cold. Not escape. Just new. Sarah nodded once. At the institute. Everything changed. From the hallway, for the first time, Hassan and Sarah was surrounded by people who valued her. Tears welled in Sanaa's eyes. Called her talented. I failed both of them in different ways. Asked her for help. She whispered. She wasn't invisible anymore. This time. She was he someone. Simply said. Months but passed. She didn't fail us. Sarah's performance even when we only failed grew her. Stronger. Sarah stood up slowly. Debates, competitions, she walked toward her and parents. Leadership programs. There was no her anger confidence left in grew her. Quietly, only but closure. Firmly. I don't need the past to when be perfect, everything became silent. A pause. She still thought about home. Needed it to be not understood. Because she missed being Hassan lowered his head, but because she couldn't forget the little girl she hugged her daughter. Meanwhile, this time, back home, Sarah didn't life pull away. Was changing too. Not because Ollie she was becoming more difficult, but because she had finally healed enough to accept it. But not Ollie stood quietly behind them. He argued with teachers, watching. He refused to study properly. Outside, and slowly, the evening sky family that once celebrated him began to worry. Was still imperfect. One evening, but it was no longer broken. Sarah had made a mistake to change her past. She said softly. She returned to change what the past had created. Then he asked, in doing so, about us. She didn't just find success. Sarah was now 22 because sometimes the strongest studies with are not the ones who escape and was offered their pain, an opportunity but to the work ones at a who come back and transform it. Her life had changed completely and from the in quiet, that house. Ignored girl years she once was. Struggle she was confident now. Love finally arrived. Respected, not as perfection, but life has a strange way of bringing people back to unfinished chapters. One evening, she received a call. It was from her mother. Sanaa's voice sounded tired and older than before. Sarah, can you come home for a few days? There was a pause. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She hadn't been home in a long time. Not because she hated them, but because she had finally learned to live without needing their approval. What happened? She asked calmly. Sana hesitated. It's Ollie. That name brought a quiet silence between them. He's not doing well. He left studies. He argues all the time. He doesn't listen to anyone anymore. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. The child who was once celebrated was now lost. After a long pause, she said softly, I will come. Not because she was responsible, but because she had finally become strong enough to face the past without breaking. When Sarah arrived home, nothing felt the same. The house was quieter than she remembered. Less joy, less energy, more emptiness. Sanaa opened the door. For a moment, she just looked at her daughter. Sarah was no longer the small, silent girl. She was calm, composed, mature. Sanaa's eyes filled slightly. Sarah. But Sarah gently nodded and walked inside. Hassan was sitting in the same living room chair. He looked older, tired. When he saw her, he stood up slowly. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Welcome back, he said quietly. Sarah replied politely, Assalamu alaikum. And then her eyes shifted. Ollie was sitting in the corner of the room. His posture was careless, his expression restless. A phone in his hand, head